volunteers. It's great to have you today. Great to get this 2022 event started. This is our first training session for the 2022 IEEE-USA CVD. I'm Russ Harrison, Director of Government Relations for IEEE-USA here in Washington, D.C. And I want to start by thanking you all for volunteering for this event. Our annual CVD is our biggest advocacy event of the year. It's usually tremendously helpful for our efforts on Capitol Hill and usually a great deal of fun for the participants as well. And so we will jump right into it. What we're going to do today in this particular session is talk about kind of the logistics and behind the scenes information you need to have successful meetings with your legislators. We're not going to talk about what specifically to talk about this year, 2022. We'll do that in the second session next Tuesday. And I'll tell you why later on in the session. But before we can talk about what you want to say, we have to talk about how you're going to say it so you know how to kind of think about these issues. And that's what we're going to cover now. But before we do that, let me tell you where we stand in the CVD overall. As of a couple days ago, and registrations are still trickling in, we have 208 individual participants across the country. You're coming from 39 different states and 134 unique congressional districts, which represents 212 legislative meetings on the week of the 5th, more or less. That's 40% of Congress, which is very cool. All of these numbers are up from last year, and frankly, it's pretty amazing how well we are covering Congress. 208 people covering 212 congressional districts is pretty cool. We have 7 congressional districts and states, I should say. As of Tuesday, and so again, this is a little dated, we have 78 confirmed meetings. And 7 of those, so just under 10%, are with members of Congress themselves. Just so you understand these things, Capitol Hill moves very last minute. And so it is normal for us not to get a lot of these meetings until the last week. And we're still a week out, a little more than a week out. So we expect to get all 212 meetings. And we expect, based on past events, to have about 10% of the meetings with members of Congress. So we are on track to have what will be our most successful CVD ever, thanks to you. All right, so what are we doing here? First thing that we need to note is the role of Soapbox Consulting in this project. Soapbox Consulting is one of the premier grassroots advocacy organizations in Washington, D.C. Their business is helping individual voters talk to their legislators. I've been working with Soapbox Consulting since really the late 90s, which is kind of disturbing. But they've been around a long time. I know their owner. I've known them for a very long time. They do a great job. They helped us with last year's CVD. They're going to be helping us with this year's CVD as well. In addition to scheduling all of your meetings, which they are working on right now, they are going to send you an email with a link to a personalized digital tool. It's not an app, it's a digital tool, web-based digital tool. That tool will give you all of the information you need for your meetings. So questions about how do I know how to get in, who am I going to meet with, when are the meeting, all of that will be answered in the virtual tool, which you will receive next week. That will include your personal meeting schedule, your team's meeting schedule, and we'll get to that in a minute, as well as contact information from all of the IEEE team members you'll be working with. You'll get information on the staff you're going to be talking to and their contact information, all of our leave behind material, background material to help prepare you for your meetings, which you'll be receiving next week from me and through this tool. There's a link to 24-hour technical support on the day of your meetings if something goes wrong, and personal login links for all of your virtual meetings with your legislators, all contained in that one tool that you can use off of your cell phone or off of your computer. You will be receiving an email from Miguel Torres at soapboxconsulting.com next week. It should be out on Tuesday, might not arrive till Wednesday. When you get that email from Miguel, please open it and open the digital tool quickly within a day or so. The reason for that is that Soapbox is going to be paying attention to who opens the tool. Last year's IEEE-USA CVD, we had a surprising number of no-shows. IEEE members who simply didn't show up for their meetings. In a couple cases, we had meetings with members of Congress where nobody showed up from IEEE. That is very bad. And so this year, we're going to be paying attention to who opens the digital tool, the Soapbox tool, as a way of knowing who's actually going to show up. And so if you don't open the tool by next Friday, we're going to have to get in touch with you to make sure you're still participating. It is okay if you need to withdraw from the CVD, but we need to know as soon as possible so that we can tell your legislative offices that you won't be there. And if necessary, so we can cancel your meetings. It's not a good thing to cancel meetings with members of Congress, but it is much, much better to cancel them to have no-shows. So when you get a link to your Soapbox tool, please do click on it reasonably quickly. You will receive a comprehensive training in how to use the tool at our March 29th event, the next training session. But I just want to let you know what's coming. And to ease your concerns about how you're going to keep track of all this, don't worry about it. It's all going to be kept track for you. So I mentioned a minute ago that you have a team. Your team are other IEEE members from your congressional district or from your state with whom you're going to work. These meetings can be a little intimidating. They can be a little difficult. I mean, they're not really difficult, but they can appear difficult. Easier if you can work with other people. And so none of you should have a meeting all by yourself. It sometimes happens, but you should be teamed up with other IEEE members. Usually, the team is your entire state. So we got 2 participants from Oklahoma. They're from 2 different congressional districts, but the Oklahoma team will be both participants from the state of Oklahoma. A couple states we've had to divide into multiple teams: California, Texas, New York, the big states. In those cases, your team will be a subset of all the IEEE members from your state. We have something like 20-something participants from California. And so we have several different teams. You must go to all of the meetings for people you vote for. Now, for a state like California, where we have 20 people participating, if you can't make the Senate meetings, it's not a big deal. Please tell us, but we got 20 other people there, that's going to be fine. But if you're the only person from your congressional district and you're not at that meeting, we have to cancel the meeting, even if some of your teammates are there from or surrounding congressional districts, because we got these meetings by promising voters. And legislators took the meeting because they had an opportunity to meet with voters. If the voter isn't there, the meeting isn't going to happen. And so you have to be there for your meetings with your team, for the people you vote for. You are also invited to attend the meetings for all of your team members. Again, IEEE is a community. We are one association. We back each other up. And so you're invited to go to all the meetings. We hope you go to all the meetings, but you definitely have to be at the meetings for your team. The reason I'm dwelling on this is because it will be helpful if you can meet with your team prior to your first meeting on usually the 6th to talk about who's going to say what, who wants to talk about which points, what you all want to bring up, and just to make sure you know how the flow of the meeting is going to go. The rule of your meetings is the voter is always in charge. Everybody can talk, at least a little bit. I mean, if you've got 20 people in the meeting, that's going to be tricky. But if it's just 3 or 4 people, which is typical, everybody should get a chance to talk. But the meeting is about the voter, and the voter needs to be front and center. Now, what do I mean by all this? This is a copy of Maryland Team 2's current Soapbox schedule. This is what it will actually look like when you pull it up, more or less. And this is what we have currently for Maryland Team 2. We have 3 participants: Raj, Rodolfo, and Rajinder. As you can see, they are from 2 separate congressional districts. Raj is from the Maryland 6th District. Rodolfo and Rajinder are from Maryland 8. So this team has 4 meetings, 2 Senate meetings, which will include all of the Maryland people. Everybody from Maryland, California, New York, and the other big states will all have 1 meeting with the senators. We don't get multiple meetings. So you have 2 meetings with the 2 Maryland senators, and then 2 additional meetings with the 6th Congressional District representative and the 8th Congressional District representative, Congressman Jamie Raskin and David Trone. So we look down at the schedule there at the bottom. The meeting with Senator Ben Cardin is going to be at 11:30. The meeting with Senator Chris Van Hollen is going to be at 4:00 p.m., again, with the entire delegation. We do not yet have meetings scheduled with either representative. Again, at this point in the process, that's typical. We will get these meetings, particularly Raskin's office. We work with Raskin's office all the time, but they don't like scheduling these things in advance. So all of that information will be on your schedule when you look at it, when you open up the digital tool from Soapbox. When the meetings occur, Raj will run the meeting with Congressman Trone because he's the voter. Rodolfo and Rajinder can share responsibilities when we meet with Congressman Raskin. Raj can talk during the meeting with Congressman Raskin, but the voters should be front and center. Walk through this a little bit more. You can see I've blocked it out because this will be public. This presentation will be publicly available, but all team members will have contact information for all the other team members to allow you to coordinate. You will see down at the schedule, we have Senator Ben Cardin with Helen Rogers, LC. Helen Rogers is the staffer, not necessarily the staffer you'll meet with, but your primary contact. We'll talk about the LC, which stands for Legislative Correspondent, in a minute. And then we have their office name and the office number, rather, Senate House Office Building in room 509. Not that it matters because we can't get into the office buildings and all these meetings are virtual. When you open up your virtual tool, this will also have the link to the Zoom meeting where you will talk to the legislators or their staff. Those haven't been put in yet. They'll be put in next week. But this is what you will see, and this is where all the key information for your meetings will be found. Quick note on the staff abbreviations. COS is Chief of Staff, and the second most important person in the office after the member of Congress, him or herself. LD stands for Legislative Director, which is beneath Chief of Staff. LA is Legislative Assistant, which is kind of the standard policy person in the office. There are usually 5 to 7 of these in a congressional office, more in a Senate office. SCHD, SCHD is Scheduler, who keeps track of the legislative schedule. And LC is Legislative Correspondent, which is kind of the bottom level policy person, the basic entry level policy person in office. I'm giving this to you for your information. It is not, in fact, important, because you will treat everybody you speak to as though they are the member of Congress. If the LC you're talking to is younger than your grandchildren and looks like they just got out of college, they probably did, and it doesn't matter. A key to these meetings is treating everybody with respect. So knowing kind of the level they are is useful to kind of knowing their perspective, but it is not useful in determining how you communicate with them, because you should communicate with all of them basically exactly the same way. We'll dwell on that a little more later. All right, so what do we mean by legislative meetings? What are these going to look like? And here is a rough outline of what a typical meeting will look like. And the key takeaway from this is they are not very long. 20 minutes is typical, 30 minutes is kind of maximum, which means you need to give some thought to not what you're going to talk about, but what you're not going to talk about, because you simply don't have time to go into a great deal of detail on any of this, nor do you need to have a successful meeting. So let's walk through a typical meeting here. First of all, you need to introduce yourself. Who is talking to the staff or the member of Congress? Now, the legislative office already has all of your names, so they already know who you are. We had to provide that to get the meetings, but they don't know kind of what you do. They don't know where you are. And so in just 2 or 3 sentences. This is not your entire resume. This is just enough information for the people you're talking to kind of put you in context. You need to tell the legislator a couple key pieces of information: your name, where you live, place yourself on a map, not your address, which they, by the way, have, but I live in Percyville. I live in this particular neighborhood. That's all you need to do, but put yourself on the map, and then 1 or 2 sentences about what you do in very basic terms. Just kind of give the person you're talking to an idea of what you do. I design satellites. That's it. That's all you need. That's sufficient. I work in the utility business. I'm a safety engineer. Just a little bit of information so they understand your background and understand that you know what you're talking about, which in IEEE's case is important. You have 3 or 4 minutes to introduce everybody. If you have 7 or 8 people in your group, that's not a lot of time per person. And so you got to keep it tight and short. If you have a 20-person Senate meeting, one person should just kind of introduce everybody very quickly because you don't have a lot of time. And you don't want to spend your 30 minutes telling people who you are and then run out of time to tell them what you want them to know, which is the second part of the meeting. What are we here to talk to you about? We want to talk to you today about the federal budget and specifically the importance of basic research in the budget. That's it. Very quickly, this and this, maybe this, this, and this, depending on what you want to do. And we'll talk about, like I said, the details of that in the next training session. But very succinctly, kind of give them the context of what's going to happen next. And then link what you're talking to your local community as best you can. Information about how basic research is important to the U.S. economy is good. And they already know it. And if they don't, I can give it to them. Knowing what federal basic research means to your local town, your family, your community, your business, that's something I can't give them. And it's also something they probably don't have, but it's absolutely gold to a politician. And so after you talk about kind of the big high level thing, we're going to talk about the federal budget and basic research in these 2 agencies and 1 or 2 other things. Mention why it is important to your local community that the congressman focus on this. Don't have to go into a lot of detail, but 1 or 2 anecdotes here. Just so you know, there are at least 3 companies that I know of in my town that have used SBIR grants. These are research grants for small businesses, SBIR grants to get going, and they employ at least 25 people. So Congressman, just so you understand, that's what these budgets mean to our town. Not a lot more detail beyond that, but just kind of the basics to put it in context, political context, and political context is always local. Then you move into the meat of the meeting. And keep in mind, we're like less than 10 minutes into your meeting already. Keep things short. We want to go into our asks. An ask is what we want the legislator to do for us. Your meetings with legislators are always business meetings. You are there to get something. And your legislator is there to find out what that is. And legitimately, that's what they want to know from you. They want to know what the legislator, can do to make you happy so that in November you vote for them. And you don't want to say that. And they don't want to say that. But that's what's really happening here. The point is, you need to be direct. And they want you to be direct. We want you to support the USICA bill in the Senate for these 3 reasons. And I'll talk about what USICA is in a minute. We want you to support the NIST budget. We think NIST is a fantastic agency, and this is why. Be very direct, very clear. These meetings are not tutorials. They are not graduate level courses. They are not lectures. They're supposed to be discussions. The most important piece of information, well, actually, the most important piece of information is you live in Smithville. After that, the most important piece of information is this is what I want you to do. And everything that follows that statement is of dramatically less importance. In other words, the reason you want something is not that important. It's that you want it that matters, because that is ultimately what the legislator's job is giving you things so you support them. That's how democracy works. So be blunt. This is what we want. A couple reasons why, and these can be pretty high level. Engineers like to go into the details because that is your business, and that's fine in most contexts. Here, it's not. Some general arguments, particularly if you can link them to the local situation, an anecdote or two, maybe a couple data points is all you need. Comprehensive discussion of the state of play of federal research is for another time. You got 5 or 7 minutes here to make your case. Again, not a lot of time, so focus on what the most important reasons you want this are, state them, and move on. That's all you need to do. Then you need to open up the meeting. You made your pitch. You told them what they need to know. You told them what you had to say. Now you need to allow the staff, allow the member to ask you questions about not the legislation typically, because let's face it, they know the legislation better than you do. And that's fine. You're not professional lobbyists. You're not expected to know the legislation that well. They might ask you questions about your business. They might ask you questions about your company, about your community. Hey, where do your kids go to school? What do you think's go? I mean, they could take this any way they want. I've been very clear that when you're talking, you have to keep things very tight because you're on a time deadline always. Once they start talking, timer turns off. You can talk as long as they want to talk about whatever it is they want to talk about. And that's their call because it's their time. When they're done asking questions, and they will give you some little hints, if there's nothing else, you say, thank you for your time. We're really grateful. We appreciate you carving out some time on your undoubtedly busy schedule. Have a great day. And hang up. These should be very tight, very direct meetings. Like I said, 20 minutes is about all you're going to get, 30 minutes if you're lucky. And so when you're done, hang up, let them get back to their day, and then follow up. More on that in a minute. So what does it mean to have a successful meeting? First of all, you want to be prompt. You want to be on the call with your camera working, your microphone working, 5 minutes at the latest before these calls are supposed to start. And then you're going to be patient because they're almost certainly going to be late because they almost always are. If they haven't arrived within 10 minutes of when the meeting is supposed to start, you want to tell Soapbox so they can reach out to the staff to pester them. But they don't really control their schedules. And so sometimes they just can't help it. They're going to be late. You're going to be flexible and understanding when they don't show up on time. These meetings are going to change times up until they start, basically. So we need to be prepared to be flexible. We understand you have families, you have jobs, you have other responsibilities. If your meeting is set for 10 o'clock and suddenly it gets moved to 3 o'clock and you can't do it at 3 o'clock, that's okay, as long as you tell Soapbox so we can tell the staff. We can manage these things as long as we know what's going on, but we are going to be understanding if the schedule changes at the last minute. Like I said earlier, treat everybody as if they are the member of Congress. If you can't stand your member of Congress, we're going to treat them respectfully anyway. Now is not the time to tell them that they're horrible people or that the last vote was awful. Now is certainly not the time to tell them you have no intention of voting for them or to tell them that you intend to vote for them. That conversation can happen somewhere else. This is just about what you want from your legislator. Generally speaking, you shouldn't mention the elections at all. Stay focused, stay on target, stay on message. Let your colleagues have time to talk. Make sure you listen to the staffers or the legislator if they have questions. Let them interrupt you if they want to. That's actually hard to do in a video conference, but you want to try to allow that if you possibly can. If they ask you questions, respond honestly. There are 2 legitimate answers to any question. One is your opinion on what the answer is. Your opinion on what the answer is. If you're talking about the federal research budget and the senator says, you know what do you think about Bitcoin? Well, that's not on the agenda, but that's okay. IEEE-USA has a position on Bitcoins. We think they're kind of cool, but interesting. You're not speaking for IEEE. You're speaking for you. And so if you have an opinion on Bitcoin, you should tell them what that is. And that's fine. The other appropriate answer is, I don't know, but I'll find out. So if they ask you a question about something and you don't know what they're talking about, tell them you don't know what you're talking about. That is fine. You're not a lobbyist. I'm supposed to know everything when I go in to talk to them. You don't have to. So if you don't know, just say, I don't know, but I'll find out. And now you have an excuse to follow up with the staffer, which is useful in and of itself. After the call, you come to me, said, hey, Russ, they asked me about this bill. I don't know what they're talking about. I will find out what the bill is, and I will tell you. And then you will tell the staffer. So you have a research team behind you to get the answers. You don't need to have them at the meeting. Lastly, again, remember to ask. Legislators want to know what you want from them. Be blunt and direct and say, this is what I want you to do. They'll probably not commit to it. That's okay, but you want to make the ask. A couple notes on video meetings. I think you all know these by now. We've been doing Zoom way too often. But remember your basic video meeting etiquette. Don't talk over other people because it's hard to hear anybody. Remember to unmute yourself. And, you know, the general rules for how to do these Zoom meetings, which we've all figured out. Remember to always identify yourself when you speak, even if you've spoken 3 or 4 times in the meeting already. This is Jeff from Somerville. This is Dave. I work for Boeing. Just kind of identify yourself very quickly when you speak. Remember that it is very hard to interrupt people on a video call because we don't have as much nonverbal communication tools. It's hard to let the speaker know you want to speak. If the staff is making an effort, try to give them space to do that. And if you want to interrupt the staff, try not to, because it's going to be hard to do that without being a little rude. The most important rule, the only way you can really mess this up is if you record the session. Legislators are very, very nervous about people recording them on a video conference and then taking the recording and editing it in ways that makes them look stupid and then putting it on social media, which has happened. The rule is, and the thing that IEEE had to commit to before we could get you these meetings, is no recording. If the staff or the member of Congress perceives that someone is recording the meeting, they will probably immediately end it. And I will have to go groveling to that office to apologize for whatever it is that you just did. So don't record, and don't ask if you can record. You can't. But so long as you don't do that, you know, be nice to people. Don't be rude. It's going to be really hard to mess up these meetings. As long as you don't try to record the meetings, it will be a good meeting. It will be a successful meeting, and it will be an impactful meeting. And that's a fairly easy rule to follow. The other difference between a good meeting and a great meeting is those local hooks. The information that I can't give them because I just don't know your local community. Federally funded research projects in your community, cool stuff going on at the local university that they may not know about, companies that were founded particularly recently to do technological work. Congressmen love to know stuff like that. They love to tell other voters about it because it makes them sound informed. Unique research facilities at your local universities. By the way, if you work at a university and you're doing some really cool research and you have a cool lab that was partially funded or entirely funded with federal funds, if your member of Congress hasn't been to visit, why don't you invite them? That is something you can do with these calls. Hey, we're doing some really good robotics research in this lab that was funded through the Department of Energy. If you ever want to come see what we're up to, would love to host you for a day to show you what federal dollars are buying in our community or something along those lines. And then let your university know you're doing it because they hate to be surprised. But these local stories and local anecdotes are what the legislator wants from the meeting, as well as the asks. They want to know what you want. The national stuff, the kind of big picture arguments, A, they probably already know them. And B, that's not how you get reelected. You get reelected by knowing local. So tying things to your personal experience, your personal knowledge, is the way you make a good meeting great. And then you follow up. The CVD isn't really an event. It is the launching point for a relationship with your legislators and their staff. As I mentioned, Soapbox is going to give you the staff member's name and the staff member's contact information, which will allow you to follow up. Send a thank you the day after your meeting, 2 days after, whatever, to remind them who you are. And if they've asked for anything in the meeting that you didn't have, which is fine, you now have an invitation to send them an email saying, hey, at our meeting on April 6th, you asked for this. It is attached. Please let me know if you have any questions. Very simple, very easy to do. But here's the problem. Your legislator probably meets with thousands of people a week, at least hundreds of people a week. The staff do basically the same thing. All of those meetings start to look exactly the same after a little while. And so to build the connection between you and the staff, you and your legislator, you have to do this repeatedly so they remember you. A thank you and a follow-up are great ways to start that process. A month or so later, in May, June, July, follow up with another email. Hey, I met with you back in April. We talked about the importance of the NIST budget. I understand the budget has progressed. Could you let me know how it's going? Have you been able to secure funding for this thing we talked about? It doesn't matter what you ask them. It doesn't even matter if you don't care about this information. It's about taking an opportunity to reestablish that connection and remind the legislators who you are and that you're paying attention. It's also a great way to build a relationship if you want to have the legislator ask you for technical information, which will not happen until they know you and trust you. And so following up, not every week, not even every month, but periodically helps build the relationship and the trust that you need to really work with a legislative office. Email is fine for all of this. There was a time when that was a debatable point, but it's not anymore. Once the staff know who you are, using their personal email address is fine. Local visits, however, are even better. Every legislative office maintains one or more offices in their district. Senators have multiple offices around the state. One of them is probably not that far from you. If you are asked for additional information and you don't mind, you can go to their local office and say, hey, I met with this staffer on, April 7th or whenever the meeting was. He asked me for this. Here you go. Politics is a people business, which is hard in our virtual time here. But creating that personal connection is actually much more powerful than the video calls, which is still very powerful and effective. But if you can find an excuse to bop into the local office and introduce yourself, that's pretty cool and pretty valuable. If you can set up a meeting between the legislator and your lab, your company, your local IEEE section, that's pretty cool too. And if you want to talk about that after the CVD, I'm happy to do it. All right, so that's kind of a quick overview on what you're going to be doing on the April 6th for most of you. The next question is, what are we going to talk about? And the answer is, we're going to talk about the importance of Congress making strategic investments in technology, the same phrase we used last year because it works pretty well. Specifically, we're going to talk about the USICA and the Competes bills. That's actually one bill. The USICA is the Senate bill, Competes is the House bill. And we're going to talk about the president's budget request. That's a fiscal 2023 budget request. Here's the fun thing about this fly-in this year. Both of those issues, I can't tell you what we're going to talk about yet. The negotiation between the House and the Senate over USICA and Competes. Like I said, Competes is passed in the House. USICA has passed in the Senate. They are not the same bill. They're kind of similar, but they're going to be combined in what's called the conference committee into one bill, which will then be voted for the House in the House and the Senate and will probably become law before the summer. Those negotiations are happening right now. And there is, in fact, a non-zero, a small but non-zero chance that this bill is going to be passed before you have your meetings, which is why we're doing an update date on April 4th. So I can give you the best possible information. Now, that's not likely to happen. The negotiations are ongoing. The bill probably won't be ready till the end of April, probably won't be passed till May or June. So we have time. But right now, they are negotiating this, which means your timing for your meeting is perfect to be powerful and influential on this issue. This is about as best as we can possibly do. So our timing is good as long as they're not efficient, and they're almost never efficient. And like I said, we're going to go into detail about all this next Tuesday for our messaging training session. The president's budget is not out yet. So we have a general idea of what the president's budget request is going to look like, but we're not expecting it. Today is Thursday. We're expecting it actually this afternoon or tomorrow morning. But by Tuesday, we should have it, and I'll be able to tell you what's in it. We're going to pick out a couple highlights and lowlights in the president's budget for you to focus on. But that's why we're not talking about the messaging today, because I don't actually know yet, because all of this is happening right now, which is good, but it does make the training a little bit difficult. So right now, for today and until next Tuesday, think about, kind of get your head around what the meeting is supposed to look like. Think about how federally funded research and federal research projects impact you personally, and start to figure out what those anecdotes are going to be. And then we'll put them into context around the issues next week. Our training schedule today is our How to Conduct a Virtual Meeting, which we are almost done with. Next Tuesday, the 29th at 1 p.m., we'll be discussing the messaging. That will be recorded, and you will be able to watch it online. This meeting, by the way, should be available online tomorrow morning, probably this afternoon, but I don't want to rush our IT guys. April 4th at 10 a.m., we'll have our last minute updates. That could be a very short meeting, or it could be rather complicated, depending on how much happens between the 29th and the 4th. And then your meetings are going to be on the 5th. Most of them will be on the 6th. Some of them could be as much to a week later. Last year when we did our meetings virtually, we had one meeting that didn't happen until 12 days after the CVD. But it was with a major U.S. senator, so we said thank you, and of course we'll wait. If your congressman says, I can't meet with you on the 6th, but I can give you half an hour on the 10th, we're going to do it. We're going to take the meeting. And if you can't make it, that's okay. They understand, we understand, everybody understands, but you need to tell us. But if we can get those meetings, late, we'll still take them, because meeting with a legislator is hard, and we don't want to pass up that opportunity. Everything here will be, like I said, online. Everything will be posted as fast as we can. And so if you can't make these training sessions, the recordings will be there for you. You, of course, can always contact me directly. Some other issues that always come up, some other questions, before we turn to the questions in the comment section, which I'll turn to in just a moment. I'm talking about people you vote for, but what if you don't vote? What if you're a student or someone on green card? How do you handle that situation? And the answer is you handle it directly and honestly. When it comes time to introduce yourself, Senator, it's great to meet you. My name is Dave. I'm a engineering student at the university down the road. I'm here on a student visa from Chile. That's all. You don't have to go into details. I'm on an H-1B visa. All they need to know is what your status is. You don't need to go into detail if you don't want to go into detail. The legislator, however, or the staffer, will basically view you as if you were an American anyway. Because, let's face it, there's a reasonably good chance that at some point in the future you will be an American citizen. And even if you won't, they know that there are other engineering students or professionals in exactly your same situation, probably at your school or company, that think exactly the same way you do. So the fact that you can't vote isn't actually a reason not to listen to you. But you do need to be honest about it. Can you join other meetings that aren't on your schedule? The answer is yes-ish. The ideal size for a legislative meeting is about 5 people. 6 is fine, 7 is okay. But once you get past like 6, it starts to get crowded. If there is a meeting, a friend of yours or a colleague that is a 2 or 3 person meeting and you want to join, let me know. We can add you to the schedule. We have to tell the staff that you're coming. But yeah, we can usually do that. If you do not live in California and you want to meet with one of the California senators, no. We have 20-something people in that meeting. We can't add additional people. Try to stick with your teams. We can do a little bit of creativity to add you to some other meetings, but generally we discourage it. Can we set up a meeting for you with someone you don't vote for when we don't have a voter going to that meeting? No. Not only because we have 200 meetings we're trying to set up, that puts a pretty big strain on us, but also we probably can't get it. Unless you have a previous relationship with the legislator, meaning the legislator will recognize your name and want to meet with you, we generally speaking cannot get a meeting for you with a senator just because you want to talk to them. They want to talk to voters. And if you're not a voter, you don't live in the district, don't live in the state, it's going to be tough to do. Are we accepting more registrations? The answer is yes. I think the website actually says registration is closed. Don't believe it. It's not true. We're just trying to encourage people to register quickly because it does take time to get these meetings. But in politics, more is always better. And having more people, more voters at these meetings is good. Here's the caveat. The closer we get to April 6th, the harder it will be to get you meetings. If we already have a meeting for your legislator, adding you to the meeting at the very last moment is easy. And your legislator wants you there, so it's not a big deal. But if we don't already have someone and we don't already have a meeting, as we approach April 6th, it's going to be really hard to get you the meeting. And at some point, we won't try because we don't want to look foolish. And so if you have friends that would like to join us, have them register. If you have colleagues, particularly if they're in a state that isn't currently represented, have them register. If the registration link isn't working, have them email me directly. I need their name, their IEEE member number, and their home address. That's where they vote. Send me an email. We'll take care of it. But as we start to get into next week and start to get towards the end next week, it's going to get really hard to get additional meetings. So have them do it soon. Can you get a copy of these slides? Absolutely. This is not a confidential thing we're doing here. It's not secretive. It's not classified. Everything we are doing here is basically public. All of these presentations will be available publicly online. You can also access them with the link. You can access a recording through the link you have. But if you would like a copy of these slides, I'm happy to send them to you. If you want to share the leave behind documents once you get them, which will be next week, feel free to do that with any IEEE members. Please don't post them online. But if somebody wants a copy, fine. If you want to share information about the CVD with your local IEEE section, you should definitely do that. And if that includes sharing a copy of the slides with whomever you like, that's fine. This is a public event. We want to spread the word as widely as we possibly can and appreciate any efforts you're willing to make towards doing that. Lastly, I always get questions from a couple of people who work for companies that have a government relations office. They have their own lobbyists. Should I tell them about this meeting? It's up to you. You don't have to. It's probably a good idea. I mean, telling your bosses that you are a political asset for the company is a good thing. And so telling your government relations office you're doing this is probably good. You don't have to, but I would generally recommend it with, again, a caveat. These meetings are not your company meetings. You are not a representative of your company or of IEEE, and you are not speaking on anyone's behalf. So you can tell your corporate government relations office you're doing this, but you're not asking for permission. You are an American citizen. You can meet with your legislator anytime you want. And if your corporate government relations office asks you to say some things, you can if you want, but you don't have to. And I would urge you to resist letting lobbyists take these meetings over. In our next session, I am going to give you some things to say at your meeting. The team should bring them up because that's what we told the staffers we were going to talk about. But if you want to talk about something else, these are your meetings. Do it quick, do it directly, and be mindful of the other participants. But I don't tell you what to say. I work for you. And if you want to take the meeting in a different direction, you don't need my permission to do that, nor do you need your company's permission to do that. And so I would tip the government relations guys off, but make sure they understand it's your meeting. And that is the quick overview of how to do a meeting with a member of Congress. The most important thing to take away from this conversation is that this is actually easy. The legislator and the staffers are going to want you to have a positive experience. They are going to try to work with you to make your meeting successful. If you forget something, if you forget a bill number, if you get the details wrong, if you fumble the data, it doesn't matter. What is important is you tell them what you want them to do and give them a sincere reason why. And if you're not terribly eloquent when you do it, that is fine, because they are paid to figure out what you want. And that will not actually detract from the effectiveness of the meeting. So long as you are polite to everyone and you don't record the meeting, this is going to be very successful and you should have a really good time doing it. I'm Russ Harrison. I'm the Director of Government Relations with IEEE-USA in Washington, D.C. My email address is r.t.harrison@ieee.org. My direct phone number is 202-530-8326. If you have any questions, concerns, problems, reach out anytime. I will be trying to monitor my email pretty much 24/7 from now on just to answer CVD-related questions, so reach out anytime. And with that, I'm going to flip over to comments and questions. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and I will answer them all eventually. This section is just about over. We're aiming for about an hour, and the next session will be about an hour as well. Your objective in general is twofold. I'm responding to Bert's questions. We want you to talk about the importance of the federal budget. And like I said, I don't know exactly what that means until I see the president's budget request. And to talk about the USICA and competes bills, which we'll go into more detail in our next meeting. Other things you want to talk about, keep in mind, you don't have a lot of time, so you can't do 100 of these things. But if you want to add another ask, another thing that you personally care about, you should do that. The other team objective, by the way, is to tell them about IEEE and about the technical expertise that you bring to the table, which you do not have to do explicitly. You will do simply by showing up. One other piece of information, and Bert, thank you for reminding me because I always forget to do this. You will receive from me next week a chart of all the congressional districts and states that are participating in the fly-in. And next to each congressional district will be a number. That number is the number of IEEE members in that district or state. Telling that to the legislator is also important to remind them how many votes we represent. We don't want to phrase it that way, but that's how they'll interpret it. So that's kind of important too. You'll get that again next week. If you don't vote for them, don't bring that up. This is Mark's comment. You should leave them with the impression that if they do what you ask, you would be happy to back them 100% in the next election without actually mentioning the election at all, ever in any context. There is another way you can screw up this meeting, by the way, which is mentioning campaign donations. There is no money involved in this conversation. If you want to give money to a candidate later on, you should do that, but do not talk about that in this meeting. Actually doing that is probably illegal, so don't do that. And don't talk about the election, who you're going to vote for, who you're not going to vote for. This is a business meeting between an elected representative and a constituent. What happens in November is for another time. And if you desperately hate your legislator, yeah, just suck it up for the duration of the meeting and be nice to everybody. Bert, the only thing these meetings have to do with voting is the fact that you're a voter. And so your legislator is taking the meeting because they want an opportunity to impress you so that hopefully you will vote for them in November. But that's all subtext. It should never come up in the meeting about what's going to happen in November. A lot of discussion about the meeting. Ed, you are incorrect. You are actually not lobbying. And this is an important distinction, both legal and important to understand your role in this whole process. I am a professional lobbyist. And what that means is I am paid by you, by IEEE, to represent your concerns to Congress. And so when I go talk to a legislator and say, Congressman, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, I am lobbying. You are not lobbyists. You are citizens. You have an absolute constitutional right to go to any elected official and say, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. And it is nobody's business but your own. What you are doing legally is advocating, which is not lobbying. And that distinction is important legally, but also in terms of your perspective on what we're doing. This is about you as an individual talking to your elected representatives. And thus it is your meeting, not mine. And that relationship between voter and elected person is very important and very sacred. And the nonprofit law and tax law and all that says nothing about it. You are advocates, you are citizens, and that means you can do this without anybody's permission. Yeah, riffing, Rob, riffing is the way you end up with a 45-minute meeting that irritates the staff. So you got to stay on point because you're time constrained. Bert, I'm going down the comments one at a time here. We are probably not going to be that specific about the budget. And the reason we're not going to be that specific is because there isn't a budget yet. The 2022 budget passed about 2 weeks ago, so we're not going to talk about that because it's done. Congress isn't going to get around to writing the 2023 budget until probably June or July if we're lucky. So we don't have details to talk about. What we will talk about is the president's budget request, which, like I said, should be out today or tomorrow. So I can't tell you what's in it yet. But the only reason we're using the president's budget request is because it gives us context to talk about certain things. But your message will be along the lines of, we think that the president's budget request is too small for NASA. We think it's important, space exploration is a big deal. And we think that Congress should make sure we have adequate investments in the NASA budget to do space exploration. That's it. Not the details, because we don't really know them yet. We won't know them till over the summer. And that's what you employ me for. Your IEEE-USA staff will be on Capitol Hill all the time, metaphorically speaking, because nobody can get on the Hill these days, talking about the details of the budget over the summer. What I need you to do is to tell them voters in their district think these things are worth funding. We'll work the details out later. Thank you, Brendan. Mark, you are, sorry, Brendan, I'll come to you in a second. Mark, you are correct. This is not a forum to talk about your business interests. It is not the forum for you to ask for help with a government contract. The staff actually are legally constrained in how much they can do. If you have a current bid in for a government contract, they generally cannot help you. That gets into some questionable legal territory. Tell them what you're doing. Tell them you've bid for something. Let them know what you're up to. But now is not the time to ask for help. Brendan, you are correct. I left this out. Your IEEE-USA staff, there are 5 of us here in Washington in the government affairs team. We will be joining meetings all day long, and in fact, all week long, as some of the meetings happen later in the week. But there's going to be 200 meetings, and there are 5 staffers. And so we will not be in most of your meetings. If we are in a meeting, it will be because we have a personal relationship with the staff that you're meeting with, because the legislator is uniquely important and we want to listen in, or because we have 1 or 2 rookies running the meeting and we just want to make sure you have backup. But we can't even do all of those because there's too many of them. If there is an IEEE-USA staffer in your meeting, we will not talk except to introduce ourselves unless absolutely necessary. The reason for that is simply because the legislators are having this meeting to talk to voters, not us. And if we start talking, we have a tendency to take over the meeting, which we really, really don't want to do. These are your meetings. You will run them. If you run them imperfectly, which you probably will do, they will be much better than a meeting I run perfectly, because I'm not a voter. And so if we are in your meeting, and we generally won't be, but if we are, it's still your meeting. Do what you're going to do. We will just sit as far in the background as we possibly can. And that is fine. When I say send a meeting to the staff, thank you, Brendan, I mean use the personal staff email that Soapbox will be providing to you. Sending an email to the general email box for the legislator is fine, but they literally get thousands of emails a week, and it's really tough for them to process them. Send it directly to the staffer after you meet with them, and that's the best way to make sure that you are heard. Rob is asking, if you are an engineering consultant, do you use your business email or personal email when corresponding? I don't care. It does not matter. You should use the email address that you would like to correspond with the legislator down the line. And if that's your business address, use your business address. If it's your personal address, use your personal address. That is your call. The staff doesn't care, and I don't care. Screen keeps moving on me. Good. The dress code for these meetings. Thank you, Brendan. Yeah, I usually, when we had these meetings on the Hill, I used to always say these are business meetings that should be business attire, suit and tie, nice dress clothes, comfortable shoes when you're always on the Hill because you're going to do a lot of walking and your feet are going to hurt. These are Zoom meetings. You know what Zoom etiquette is. You should be respectful. If you're meeting with a legislator from New York City or Boston, you probably want to be a little fancier. California or Hawaii, you can dress down a little bit because that's the culture of the place. The idea is you want to dress respectfully to show your respect, not for the person, but for the office. You know, the United States Congress is the greatest deliberative body the world has ever seen. Show them some respect. You want to wear pajama bottoms, that's up to you, but shirt and tie would be ideal. A nice shirt is sufficient. These are virtual meetings, or Zoom meetings. It doesn't matter quite as much as it used to. Yeah, Howard, jacket and tie. Again, if we have somebody from Hawaii participating, which is awesome, people in Hawaii don't wear suits and ties, so you don't have to wear a suit and tie. If you're from a more formal part of the country, that's probably necessary. What is below the screen is between you and your family, and I don't need to know. Very good. That's all the questions I see. You have my email. You have my phone number. Use it if something comes up. Until then, I look forward to talking with you again on Tuesday. We'll get into USICA and competes in the federal budget and all the juicy details that we're going to talk about. Until then, I'm Russ Harrison. I'm your Director of Government Relations. Thank you for volunteering, and thank you for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.